Hey guys, it's Mrs. Beatty. I'm going to be reading chapter 9 of Jack and the Beanstalk. So, here we go. Chapter 9 Spoon Shot and Pudding Pond. I dreamed of Papa. He was standing in the middle of the wheat fields before harvest, brushing his hands over the feathery tops, just like he always did. Isn't she beautiful, Jack? Just like gold. As Papa brushed his hands over the wheat, a breeze rushed through, and the wheat glimmered golden in the sun. Not just golden, but gold. The wheat had turned into real gold. I bounded through the fields. We were rich. I'd never be hungry again. The ground started to tremble. I stopped and looked up. Boom, boom, boom! The sky tore open and a giant hand reached down. It ripped up the gold wheat in handfuls. It tore up the entire field, and then the giant snatched Papa. Papa! I shouted. Jack, take care of your mama and sister. Jack! Papa! I woke up, but the earth was still shaking and I couldn't see a thing. I slammed into a wall and then something felt like a foot hit me in the gut. I went rolling all over again until I slammed into another wall. Mama! I shouted. The giants are coming. Don't worry, grumbled Tom sleepily. It's just Mom Martha. I suddenly remembered. I was in a sugar bowl, in a giant kitchen, in a giant castle, in a giant world where the giants had already taken Papa. Wake up, came a warbly voice. It's a beautiful morning. It's a beautiful day for milking, a lovely day for making cheese. Martha popped the top of the sugar bowl off, and I was blinded by light. She tipped the bowl, and Tom and I rolled into her hand. Good morning, children. Did you sleep well? Are you hungry? Eat up, eat up. We must get some meat on those skinny little bones, and then it's off to the milking pen. Martha set us down on the table and gave us hot porridge with cream. Tom ate his porridge out of a thimble, and I slurped mine out of an empty acorn. It was early morning, just the first rays of sun trickling through the windows, but bright enough that I could see the whole giant kitchen now. It was an enormous, noisy, bustling place. There were giant maids stirring pots of porridge, kneading dough, washing dishes, scrubbing the floor, and stoking fires. In a giant fireplace was a big black kettle. In the blazing ovens of either side were loaves of bread, or hills of bread, more like. 4 giant tables stretched across the kitchen in 2 rows. 2 of the tables were being used for preparation. Another table was covered with food. Not giant food. Food from my world, and more than I had ever seen all at once. There were mounds of cabbage, hills of apples and pears, giant buckets of peas, carrots, beets, and radishes. Cascades of wheat and barley filled one whole end of the table, all neatly bundled and stacked. And on the 4th table, moo, meh, quack, quack. There were all manner of farm animals, cows and sheep and pigs and chickens. Above this table hung 3 shelves. They seemed to hold giant birdhouses, except the birdhouses were real houses from below. Log cabins, brick houses, and whitewashed cottages with thatched roofs and smoking chimneys. And people. There were people my size on the shelves. A woman swept the dirt off her door and off the shelf. Another hung laundry to dry on a huge dish rack, and below her a man was bathing in a giant tankard, all of them going about their business as if it were a normal day in a normal world. I couldn't believe I hadn't noticed any of this yesterday, but one does not expect to find cows in a kitchen or an entire village sitting on shelves. Good morning, my elves, Martha sang cheerfully. It's a lovely day, isn't it? And so much work to do. Dear me, I could never do it all without you sweet elves. We need to chop carrots and peel potatoes, gather eggs, pluck chickens, and milk cows. Of course, there will be plenty for all of you, so let us work hard, my elves. Many hands make light work. Martha held out both her hands. Several people readily climbed into her palm as though stepping into a carriage. Hello, Sally, Mary, Thelma, Francis, George, Harold. Oh, and I forgot your name. Mouty, said a woman. A wise and sensible name. Thank you, Mouty. Can you guys hear Zoe eating? Sorry. Martha delivered 2 handfuls of people to the animal table and a few more loads to the food table, calling each of them by name. I strained to hear her say Henry. Papa could be one of those shelves. He could be in Martha's hand right now. Amazing, isn't it? Said Tom, slurping the dregs of porridge out of his thimble. We can climb potato mountains and cheese walls and jump on bread. It'll be loads of fun. Tom, why didn't you tell me these people were here? I did. I told you I saw lots of elves every day. But I told you that my papa was taken with all our wheat and our calf. Wouldn't they have been brought here? I can see a calf over there now, I said, pointing to the table of animals. I needed to find a way over there. But suddenly Martha was in front of us. There you are, she said. It's time for the milking. She scooped me into one hand and Tom in the other. I wiggled and protested, but I needed to. Now, Tim, you mustn't allow your brother to do all the work. We reap what we sow, except in the kingdom, where nothing seems to grow anymore. Dear me, I do wish I could at least grow a tomato. I sowed some seeds in the spring and I gave them plenty of sun and water, but they didn't even sprout. Martha carried us to a barn with peeling red paint. It sat on the end of a table full of animals. At least she was taking me where I needed to go. She unlatched the doors with her giant fingers, and a whole herd of cows streamed out mooing. Now be good, boys, and milk the cows, said Martha. And Tom, dear, do not try to squirt the milk at Harold or the chickens. You know how that upsets him, and it spooks the hens, and then we need every tiny egg if we are to feed the king, not to mention every drop of milk. Goodness, it seems he never stops eating. If he could eat only gold, then I'd never have to cook again. Martha left us to see the king's breakfast. Come on, said Tom. Let's do the milking, then we can duel. But my papa, I reminded him, looking down the rows of barns. Tom sighed. Go ahead and look, but you still have to help with the milking. Martha gets terribly upset if it isn't done, and I don't like her to cry. There's a real risk of drowning. I'll be back, I promised. Maybe with Papa even. I ran down the center of the table, which was like a road through a strange village. Sheep and pigs were penned up in fences of giant clothespins and yarn. Chickens nested in coops made of giant lanterns, teacups, and an upside-down hat stuffed with straw. The table was lined with a fence made of forks and stuck in a wood for posts, and wire stretched between them. A man was spreading the hay using a giant pitchfork. Excuse me, sir, I said. I'm looking for my papa. His name is Henry, and he was taken by giants with our newborn calf. Have you seen him? No, said the man, and he continued spreading the hay, not at all concerned with my troubles. I moved on. I came to a barn made out of books. There were 3 books for walls, and a 4th split open across the top to make an A-shaped roof. There was even a man reading the open book on ceilings as he milked a cow. The words were large and looped. It reminded me of Papa's book full of giant tales. Excuse me, sir, I said to the man. He looked down from his book on the ceiling but continued to milk the cow. I'm looking for my papa. His name is Henry, and the giants took him with our newborn calf. Have you seen him? There's a newcomer on the bread bin barn, said the man. He came here a week or 2 ago. Don't quite recall if he had a calf or a pig he had. I don't quite recall if it was a calf or a pig he had. A pinprick of hope flared in my chest. I raced down the table until I found the bread bin. There was a man inside, but it wasn't Papa. He was much too big, and he was holding a pig in his arms, feeding an apple by hand. The man looked up. Hello! Come to throw a pail of slops on me, eh, Jack? I squinted. Horace? He had grown a beard, but I recognized him and his pig, Cindy. I smiled. It wasn't Papa, but seeing someone from home was like finding a clue or a sign on the trail telling you you're right on track. Is my Papa here? I asked. Haven't seen him, but I don't see much beyond this bread bin. Just pigs. I tend most of the pigs here on this table, feed them their slops and such until they all become giant bacon. I grimaced. I know, said Horace, but at least they didn't turn us into bacon, and they let me keep my Cindy. Do you remember anything about the night the giants took you? Do you remember anything about my papa? Horace scratched his head. No, not much. It was dark and loud and stuffy. Couldn't hardly breathe. One of the giants kept picking up my pigs and saying he wanted to keep him for pets, but the other giant wouldn't let him. I just held tight to my Cindy until all passed. The pig snorted in his arms, reminding Horace that he was supposed to feed her. He gave the pig the rest of an apple, and then he held a fresh one out to me. You want an apple? I took it, though I wasn't hungry. You need a place to sleep? You can stay in my bread bin. It's not too much, but we all got what we need. Thank you, but I'm not staying. I'm going to go look for my papa. You be careful now. They say some of those giants can be real ogres. I will. Thanks for the apple. He left Horace and walked slowly back to the barn where Tom was milking a cow. Come on, said Tom. I've already milked 4. I took a bucket and picked a cow to milk. Across from where we sat, Martha and the rest of the kitchen servants were busy preparing the royal breakfast trays. They set out bowls of porridge and tea and toast, but one tray stood out amongst the rest. Firstly, the tray and all the dishes were made of pure gold, right down to the sugar spoon. And secondly, it had about 100 poached eggs, 50 slabs of bacon, and a mountain of fruit. Finally, Martha unlocked a cupboard and brought out glass bowls filled with gold flakes. She sprinkled the gold all over the food, like one might dust sugar over a cake. Is that the Giant's King breakfast? I asked. Tom nodded. Can you imagine being so rich you can eat gold? I couldn't. And guess what his name is, said Tom. King Barf. He bursted out laughing. Martha cleared her throat and suddenly towering over us. His Royal Majesty's name is King Bartholomew Archibald Ragnall Fife. Tom, dear, that's a long name. And you had better watch your tongue. The king is not merciful to those who cross him, no matter how small. Why, just last week, a chambermaid told me she saw the king throw an elf straight into the fire. I gulped. I had a terrible vision of Papa being thrown into flames. Does the king keep elves, then? I asked. Why, I suppose so. Yes, though for what purpose I don't know. His Majesty gave me all my elf helpers, all except you and Tim, but all elves are given by His Majesty's command. Ding! A bell rang. Oh my! And now the king demands his breakfast. Martha sprinkled the king's breakfast with one more spoonful of gold before it was whisked away. Could King Barf had Papa? Either way, Martha had said that he was the one in charge of where they all went. That meant that he had to have seen Papa at some time and sent him somewhere. It clearly wasn't the kitchen. Heads up, said Tom. He squirted some milk right in my eye. Bullseye! Milk was dripping down my face, but I went right back to work pretending I didn't care. Then, when he wasn't expecting it, I squirted Tom in the ear, and suddenly we were in a milking duel, and not so much milking got in the buckets. Abandoning his cows altogether, Tom picked up a giant fork. Let's joust like knives, he said, raising the fork like a lance. I scoured the barn until I found a fork leaning against a bale of hay. I struggled to lift it. It was heavy. Charge! Tom cried and raced towards me. I will vanquish the villain. I lumbered forward with an awkward trot, our forks clanged together as we passed. Tom knocked me over and nearly stabbed me in my gut. I tumbled to the ground. Are you okay? Asked Tom. I grinned. Let's do it again. We clashed the forks again and again until my mind wandered to the times when Papa and I used to play swords. He'd play the villain or the giant, and I'd be the hero. We had these amazing death scenes where I'd stab him and he'd grunt and choke and fall down on the ground and twitch and lie still. I'd wait for a few moments and then I'd creep on him and whisper, Papa. But he'd stay silent and then I'd poke him a little. He wouldn't move. Finally, I would bend down and check for his breathing or a heartbeat, and that was when he'd growl and grab me and throw me up in the air. Then he'd tickle me until I laughed so hard my stomach hurt. Thinking of this made my chest hurt. I put down my fork lace. The sunlight had moved above the window now, which meant it was probably close to midday. I looked around the lunch preparations. A giant maid was shaking salt and pepper into a pot of bubbling soup. Another was placing bread and cheese on a tray, and Martha had just taken pudding out of the oven and set on the table to cool. I needed to find Papa. To find the king was my best chance. I'd meet him face to face or face to foot. I demand he give me Papa, or else. Tom, is there a way to get to the other table? The one where Martha is? Sure, we just need a spoon. A spoon? You'd be surprised how much you can do with a giant spoon. Tom disappeared, then he came back a minute later, dragging the soup spoon. He set it down and rubbed his hands together. Stand on the end there. How is a spoon supposed to get me across the table? Does it fly? Tom smiled. Something like that. Get on. I tentatively stepped to the spoon's handle, not sure what to expect. Terrific. Now wait a minute. Tom climbed up some bales of hay and onto the roof of the barn. He shouted down at me, Bend your knees! 1, 2. I suddenly realized what he was doing. Tom, I don't. But it was too late. 3. Tom jumped off the barn and landed on the other side of the spoon. I catapulted in the air. Snakes and toads! I soared over the table, arms and legs flailing, and landed on top of a mountain of potatoes. I tumbled down into a potato avalanche. Tom swung across the kitchen, joined me in a rope. That was amazing. How far you flew. About the rope, I grumbled. Where's the fun in that? Tom seemed perplexed. No elf has ever traveled by catapult before. You should feel honored. I cracked a smile. I had to admit it was fun. I also had to admit that I liked Tom quite a bit. And maybe he didn't understand what it was like to lose Papa, but he was exactly the friend I'd always wished for back home. Someone who liked big adventure and a little mischief. Tom found another spoon and was dragging it into the place beneath a giant block of cheese. Come on, it's my turn. You can jump from the cheese. Okay, I had time to send Tom up in the air once. If I shot him elsewhere across the room, he wouldn't be able to stop me from sneaking off on the king's lunch. I climbed the cheese, which made a great squelching sound every time I stuck my hands in or pulled them out. When I reached the top, I was covered in the sticky, sticky cheese. I hoped Martha wouldn't find me or she'd give me another bath. Tom was on the end of the spoon, his knees bent and ready. Count to 3, shouted Tom, grinning like he was about to get his greatest wish. 1, 2, 3. I jumped and landed on the edge of the spoon. Tom went flying. Whee! He shouted with glee. And I, being gooey and slick with cheese, slipped off the spoon and stumbled to the edge of the table. I flailed my arms and nearly fell off, but luckily caught myself on Tom's rope. Safe. Ding! The bell rang. Lunch, Martha sang. The kitchen broke into chaos. A maid swept right into my path and caught her arm on the rope, so I swung wildly across the table. I jumped on a loaf of bread and bounced a few times on a spongy surface before I flew off and splat! Landed in something warm and wet and squishy. I licked the crumbs around my mouth. Whatever I had landed on was tasty. Don't forget the king's pudding. Martha picked up the dish. The king's pudding? Wait, I shouted. Martha, I'm here. It's me, Tim. I'm in the pudding. I yelled and I waved my arms, but she couldn't neither hear nor see me. The kitchen was too loud. She quickly passed the dish off to a servant, and I was whisked away. I tried to get out of the pudding, but it was like swimming through thick, gooey mud. Impossible. The server walked briskly down the dim-lit corridors, turned a corner, and entered an enormous dining hall with sky-high arched ceilings. Giant-sized paintings on an endless table with gold and goblets of steaming food. It had lighted candles as tall as trees. The servant set the pudding down right in front of a giant. His face was pudgy and pink with dark beady eyes and a sneering mouth. His upturned nose gave him the distinct look of a pig. He was dressed entirely in gold robes, gold chains, gold rings, and 2 gold crowns upon his head, one stacked on top of the other. There was no mistaking it. This was the giant king, King Barf, and I was in his lunch.